Hey everyone, this video will be a little different. Editor Stan, my editor for the last few years, is in the process of moving home and thus could not edit this video. He will be back next week to finish off the Naruto series, but right now my good friend Tom will be covering for him. Say hi, Tom.
Come on, man, I said I'd edit your damn weeb video, just don't hurt me!
Good to have you on board there, buddy. Lovely guy that Tom, but he knows nothing about anime, so this will be funny if nothing else. Now, back to business. Over the last couple of weeks, I've covered and reviewed the Fourth Shinobi War arc, allowing myself to experience some genuinely great moments that I think could stand alongside some of the best moments in the series, all the while brute forcing my way through some of the absolute worst I've seen in the story too. Few things in storytelling are more offensive to me than boring exchanges, and unfortunately, a large part of this arc's middle section contended with that very issue I found. However, last week's video also ended on a high note as Naruto realized a form emblematic of his self-acceptance and unity with his inner demons. In other words, Naruto has managed to harness the power of Dragon Ball's Super Saiyan with the appeal and all the visual flair of a Digimon fight. It sounds silly, but it actually kind of works, trust me. How will this conclude? I have no damn idea, but we're gonna find out today. I'm Toy Nut Mark, and this is my final review of the Fourth Shinobi War arc, its climax, and the penultimate review of the entire Naruto series. As I mentioned when we last left off, Naruto had effectively achieved Super Saiyan, became the Avatar, and formed the perfect bond with his Digimon right in the nick of time. The visuals in the manga looked stunning, and we finally scratched and clawed ourselves out of that rut I agonized my way through in the last video. And I'm happy to report that I enjoy this portion of the arc so much more than its middle. In my last video, I had a growing issue with the sheer volume of scenes and how uninterested I was in them. However, with this climax, Sasuke re-enters the fray, all the while we focus on three specific conflicts, all with three different flavors, thankfully. Conflict number 1, Naruto versus Tobi. This was the battle that made this arc a joy to read once again for me last week. There's such a strong sense of stakes, culmination, and profound occasion within this battle alone that I'd honestly be happy if this was all we got. As many of you know, I'm always a big fan of techniques that impose their own unique tensions in a fight, and this is no different. When it's announced that Naruto only has 5 minutes with the newly acquired Fox form, I could feel my attention focus in on the battle even more. And this is great because in the early stages of this fight, Kishimoto ensures that Naruto's character remains consistent by having him not give up on or take out the remaining Bijus. Thanks to his interaction with Son, I can't believe that's his name, Goku, he knows that he can save all of these entities. He wants to free them. Naruto will not compromise on his ethics or morals, and it's decisions like this narratively that make for much more dramatic circumstances. It feels true to the characters, and so as a result, it feels less like an author dragging his fictional puppets around an artificial stage, and more so a believable decision that aligns with a specific character's mindset and philosophy, which makes things all the more exciting and real. Capping all of that off with some outrageously brilliant manga illustration and paneling to depict the Biju bomb from Naruto, it feels fittingly huge, and I'll admit, I was just sort of sitting there admiring them for a few minutes too. This is all to say that the beginning of this fight I loved. There's a tremendous sense of unity and fate associated with a particular flashback to the Bijus when they were young, and Naruto seems to be that connective tissue. And while all of this was great, it's made all the better thanks to the inclusion of other characters and their respective conflicts. Conflict number 2, the 5 Kage versus the reincarnated Uchiha Madara. I think much of what I like about this fight comes by way of Lady Tsunade's contribution, particularly when the first Hokage's image, Hashirama, is used for intimidation purposes by Madara. Pitting the image of her grandfather against her perceived own lack of accomplishments, he belittles Tsunade's abilities and efforts and cites that there was only ever one who was worthy of fighting him, the first Hokage, her grandfather. It's a tried and true cliche in shonen and storytelling in general, but effective nevertheless when the target of this ridicule rises to the occasion, proving that the words lobbied against her were wrong. There's some really nice Tsunade shine here too, with the focus remaining on teamwork above all else. And finally, conflict number 3, Sasuke and Itachi versus Kabuto. It's difficult to assert which of these 3 fights is my favorite, as it constantly changed from moment to moment, each one offering more narrative goodness to digest than the last. But one I found myself much more invested in than I was otherwise anticipating was Kabuto's altercation with Itachi and Sasuke. Kabuto's sort of just been there from the beginning. He's always been a means to an end for the main bad guy, Orochimaru. I found him interesting from a utilitarian standpoint, but when it came to him specifically, I never found myself asking the question who he was or where did he come from. And I think that's part of what makes Kabuto's progression to this point so appealing and interesting to me. Watching him slowly develop more and more nefarious tendencies, more power, and more influence as the story trudged on forward was enriching, and it all came to a head in this section through an illuminating flashback that helps to put us as an audience into the right frame of mind to view him finally. And that's not even to make mention of this. This was a really cool idea to play around with on behalf of Kishimoto. Resurrection, when it was initially brought up, was something I genuinely thought was interesting. It was a chance to explore a lot of what-if scenarios that we otherwise wouldn't get to explore. I did get a little bogged down last week when the story focused harshly on one aspect of the resurrection angle, which got very, very old quickly. Thankfully, however, this is something entirely new, and it involved another one of the main characters. Instead of seeing two people duke it out, we now have Sasuke having been granted the chance to actually talk to his brother again, to potentially alleviate some of the emotional baggage he's carrying. I mean, like him or hate him, Sasuke's still just a kid that's been through hell and back. I'm surprised he even knows which way is up. The moment in time that Sasuke's eyes meet the movement of Itachi zooming through the forest on his way to Kabuto facilitated some of my favorite illustrative and paneling work from Kishimoto. There's a tremendous commitment to allow this moment, and indeed us as an audience, the space and time necessary to soak this snapshot in time in. There's also no explosions or anything dangerous. It's simply a younger brother thinking he's seeing a ghost when his older brother zooms on by. With Kishimoto switching from current time to flashback panels back to present day, it helps to perfectly capture exactly what Sasuke is thinking as he begins to give chase. It's brilliant and brings to light the potential regret, confusion, and amazement Sasuke has for how things are left between them. This is a really intense scene, both from a dialogue and action perspective, as I wasn't entirely convinced I knew where Sasuke would land in terms of aligning himself. And while that made for some intense moments, it also helped me relax and enjoy the wholesome tag team these two brothers eventually became. And in terms of callbacks, Kabuto can now tap into Snake Dragon Sage mode. I'm really glad that Naruto and Jiraiya weren't the only ones to tap into this reservoir of power, and now that we know how this technique or form works, Kishimoto can focus on the choreography and drama of the situation. It doesn't need to be explained to us, and it's really refreshing to watch someone else utilize this technique after so long with a different spirit. It goes a long way in helping this world feel all the more believable. It's great world building. This video is sponsored by Raycon. If you're in the market for new wireless earbuds that offer the same sound quality as premium brands at half the price, then Raycon's everyday earbuds are exactly what you need. They look, sound, and most importantly, feel better than ever. Each pair comes with their fantastic optimized gel tips that give you the perfect in-ear fit. I use these while I exercise all the time, so trust me when I say, not only are they super comfortable, but they will not come out of your ears even during the most intense sessions. I've spoken in the past about how rarely I need to charge them, but it cannot be overstated. With 8 hours of constant playtime and a total 32 hours of battery life, they're always ready to go when you need them. And it's no wonder they've become so popular. These earbuds have over 48,000 5-star reviews, and it's easy to see why. With a 30-day happiness guarantee, you can try them totally risk-free. But honestly, you won't need it. They're great. So if you're interested in hearing for yourself, click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/notmark to get 15% off your Raycon order. So, okay, enough beating around the bush. Let's talk about Kabuto's flashback. He was a kid that started from quite literally nothing. He had no memories or anything, and is now one of the most dangerous people in the known world. He was saved from the ruins of battle and loved immediately. Danzo and Orochimaru manipulated the situation, taking his mother away on a mission for the Foundation and Kabuto into shinobi training. 5 years in, he kills his adopted mother inadvertently, and she didn't even recognize him due to the really screwed up brainwashing practices that honestly make way more sense than I'm comfortable with admitting. Last week, I know I was the "there is way too many flashbacks" guy, but I sincerely thought that this flashback in and of itself was very effective and made me care a lot more about Kabuto as a character. He's been a recurring one for quite some time now, and finally having context for his actions and the philosophy behind his connection to Orochimaru was refreshing. The flashback itself is quite long, with a fully fleshed out beginning, middle, and end. It's very much its own self-contained short story, in fact, and by virtue of all of that set itself apart in my eyes from almost all of the other short and throwaway flashbacks in the prior preliminary matchups during my last video. Kabuto wants to fill the void in his life that he's felt since childhood. He wants to be someone, and through that he's found a profound jealousy with those that can identify as Uchiha, someone that can possess a moniker with which they can identify themselves as someone rather than what he believes he might be, no one. It's creepy and also very sad. It's really interesting. And then we get to the Izanami technique.
Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
And okay. Before anyone types it, I know Kishimoto did this first, but I couldn't help but laugh when I saw that scene. The similarities were too similar. That said, I wasn't laughing in a mocking way, but just in that I was having fun with the moment. It's a really cool idea, the technique itself offering up a sacrifice and specifically preying upon the very aspect of Kabuto's personality that has caused him to be so dangerous. It's a really cool visual and one that screwed my head up on first reading. But volume 62 hits like a train. It wraps up the conclusion to Itachi and Sasuke's story quite beautifully while also providing a justification for Itachi's horrible actions that ultimately became the motivating factors behind Sasuke's entire journey. This is a world-altering moment in his young life, and the way it's presented in the manga is stunning to see unfold. There are a lot of really quiet moments in this volume following the collapse of Kabuto's Edo Tensei. One that especially caught me off guard was Dan's impromptu reuniting with Tsunade in the middle of battle to protect her. In these situations, I've found that less is more. You can present the most climactic battles I've ever seen and demonstrate characters performing death-defying feats of unimaginable skill and finesse, but all of that will never match the feeling of a single-page spread of a brother reaffirming his love and pride in his younger sibling, or the haunting white background when two lost souls finally find each other once again. And okay, I need to take a few minutes and talk about what happens from chapter 595 onwards, concerning the battle between the union of Kakashi, Guy, and Naruto versus Tobi. It is amazing, and I try not to use that word lightly, but it was a moment that had a clear and well-orchestrated build-up, which was delivered in a phenomenally engaging, exciting, and mysterious fashion. Okay, so this might seem like it's coming from left field a bit, but this reveal reminds me of all the reasons why I loved early Sherlock on the BBC, and why I really grew disinterested in it with the later seasons. When you're writing a mystery story, above all else, the most important component to its narrative creation is providing the reader or viewers the chance to successfully piece the story together for themselves without a reveal. Latter seasons of Sherlock seem to focus less on the mystery and more so on the individual characters, opting for a story driven specifically by drama and less so about the mystery itself. Which, I mean, is fine if you like that sort of thing. I didn't, but that's just my taste. The reason why the first episode of Sherlock, The Study in Pink, worked so well for me was due to the specific narrative decision made to anchor it around the answer to a given mystery. During the 90-minute runtime of that very episode, we as viewers are presented a series of murders with the circumstances they all took place within. Furthermore, Sherlock at one point even asks himself some pointed questions. Quote, "Who do we trust even though we don't know them? Who passes unnoticed wherever they go? Who hunts in the middle of a crowd?" The questions are said aloud to us to hear intentionally, and they beg us to try and solve it for ourselves. And so the point of all of these inclusions is to place us in the mind of the individual who's solving the mystery. And when it's eventually revealed, or the person, us, who pieces it together eventually does so, there's a tremendous feeling of catharsis as a result, both for the character and indeed us reading or watching. We feel this way, we feel the aha moment, if you will, because we have ourselves to blame for solving this mystery. It's an achievement. This naturally builds investment into the story you're interacting with, and furthermore builds respect between you and the character who uncovered the truth. And this is exactly what happened here with Kakashi and Obito Uchiha. Kakashi throughout this series has been one of the most observant and patient shinobi we've come across. Despite Naruto's massive surge of power in recent times, Kakashi still manages to believably provide utility to the emerging conflicts in ways only he can, particularly in this instance, as the team tried to scratch Tobi even once in an effort to figure out who he really is and ultimately to formulate a plan of effective attack. In doing so, Kakashi's blade scratches the mask of Tobi, and in that instance, the ball drops and Kakashi understands everything about how Tobi's jutsu works and moreover, who this individual actually is. And the mechanism with which this story unveils that is utterly masterful to say the least, and might I say extremely elegant and simple. Kakashi was the only one who could have made this connection successfully because he's the only other person who has that same ocular power. What a reveal! And as he rationalizes this theory, landing successful attacks, mind you, Kishimoto himself panels the eyes of Kakashi and Tobi side by side, visually communicating exactly who this person actually is, before it's revealed, giving us the chance to figure it out for ourselves. And there's tons of stuff that happened earlier in the story to allude to this very conclusion too. And then we get the flashback. Jeez, okay. For a story that leans far too heavily on flashbacks, this still hit like a train, which speaks to the level of execution this reveal is operating with. We've already seen how Kakashi received his eyes, and so this flashback instead focuses on conveying to us the humanity, the childishness, the hopes, the dreams, the insecurities, and the early life of Obito himself, drawing specific similarities to Naruto too, and Kishimoto does this entirely without any dialogue. It's beautifully handled, with the reveal of who is indeed beneath the mask cutting to the core of Kakashi as seen in his expression. Despite this being spoiled for me, the magnitude of my enjoyment, horror, and excitement I had while reading this was remarkably high. And remember when I said that volume 62 was really good? Well, volume 63 is even better, and might even be the best in the series. To say I flew through this volume is an understatement of the century. The volume is filled with either massive reveals or extended and viciously interesting flashbacks, the likes of which determine the course of action of the remainder of the story. It's extremely pivotal. And by the way, when I saw Uchiha Madara as some old guy in the origin of Obito's story, I was like, wait, what? So I guess not all the surprises of this section were lost on me after all. I think more than anything else, what this volume managed to convey to me is just how much work Kishimoto has put into the narrative of this story. For this conclusion to involve so many different characters from so many different backgrounds and generations, each with their own rich histories, philosophies, and motivations, all thoroughly fleshed out by the way, for all of that to come together and then make sense is one of the most difficult and cathartic magic tricks a writer can pull off. And for me, someone who was spoiled on one of the foundational reveals contained within this section to actually enjoy it this immensely, should stand as a testament to the writing acumen of Masashi Kishimoto in this instance. It's totally incredible. The way everything ties back together in this scene is a feast for the eyes and mind. Watching as Kakashi's hero turns out to be the villain of the century, and then Naruto throws his words back at Kakashi only to regain his resolve, it makes me remember that there are 3 generations in this fight, 4 if you count the Kage, and oh geez, okay, I didn't even mention the entrance Madara made. Despite the resurrection jutsu being released, he managed to remain, and not just that, in the middle of this scene between Naruto and Obito, he shows up before the scene switches to the bloodied heap he left the 5 Kage in. There's been so much time dedicated to these villains that I honestly am just so damn excited to see how this thing progresses. I'm all in now, totally invested. These are the best collection of chapters in the entire series easily. You might have to wade through a lot of mid-shonen in the second act of this story, but holy fuck is it worth it. The battle that rages on between these two parties is utterly nuts to the nth degree, far beyond anything I've seen in this series. Visually incredible and narratively captivating, watching Naruto, Kurama, and Kakashi manage to find a way to survive amidst all of this chaos is crazy to see unfold. And then Kurama runs out of juice. He needs time to regain his chakra, and what's more is the situation worsens. The 10-tailed Biju is released and is ludicrously powerful. It's now starting to look like Naruto and everyone is done for when it had been so long since we touched base with these guys, I honestly totally forgot about them. Again, brilliant pacing by Kishimoto here, and what's more is their presence here works double duty, with them not only serving a utility and buying Naruto more time to charge, but to also signify the world that Naruto and indeed all of them are fighting for thematically, one of unity and peace. They are, as their name suggests, allied forces, flying in the face of Obito and indeed Madara. It's honestly difficult for me to articulate and to even accurately capture the excitement I had while reading this week. To help put it into perspective, normally I read some here and there as I go about my week while writing as I go. With this one this week, I read through 6 volumes in a single day, and I also wrote a lot of this, and it felt like nothing. There's just so many interesting and fun dynamics at play, and they all center around one ongoing force of evil, Madara and Obito's mission to brainwash and enslave the world. And there are sacrifices too in this that brought a tear to my eye. Neji wasn't a character I shared a lot of time with in this story, unfortunately, but his sacrifice stood in line with his one shining moment in the series I did enjoy, throwing a quote back to Naruto that he really needed to hear from a time which made me realize just how far this journey has taken me. And then we came to Shikaku. He has been a character that's contributed one of the most emotional sequences in the story, and one that was helped immeasurably by the anime way back when. He's never been in the spotlight for long, and he's almost always been a supporting character. And I think it's for that very reason that this particular moment here, his sacrifice, hit me so powerfully. He's a terrifically written father-type character. unafraid to do what he needs to in order to give his son, his family, and the next generation a future he believes in. This really got me. And in triumphant fashion, it's this final parting gambit that leads to one of the most incredible unifications of power, facilitated by some of the most unlikely of sources, that gives them this chance. It's stunning.
Kept you waiting, huh?
I just realized something. I totally forgot to mention something super important. So, remember Kabuto, right? Well, through him, Sasuke brought Orochimaru back, but why? To what end, you might be asking? Well, Sasuke wants to know the truth and has some questions for Orochimaru specifically, and so, long story short, Orochimaru might not have the answers, but he has taken Sasuke to Konoha in the middle of a war to help him answer some of these questions. These questions being, what is a village, and what are shinobi? And when I saw what Orochimaru did to answer these questions, I was super excited. The dude resurrects all 4 fallen Hokage of the past, everyone from Minato all the way to the very first Hokage, Hashirama. And getting to see all of these characters interact with each other for the very first time was hilarious, exciting, and super interesting. I felt myself hanging on each and every word exchanged. However, after a while, the fun and games needed to come to a close, and a much more serious story and response from Hashirama followed. The ignition for this conversation to actually take place wasn't necessarily Sasuke's request. As pointed out in the story by Orochimaru himself, despite the Second Lord being the creator of the Edo Tensei technique, Hashirama is the only one capable of terminating it, and thus the decision was his to make. This is the very first time we've gotten to actually see how characters interact with Hashirama specifically. We've heard great tell of his strength and presence through his former adversaries, but never straight from the horse's mouth, and I love how candid and approachable this person is. Again, his temperament strikes me oddly similar to that of even Naruto, and fittingly, the very reason he's chosen to have this conversation over helping his community and the world is due to one observation he's made. If he leaves, he believes Sasuke will become the next Madara, which makes the introduction of this flashback all the more epic. Not for its action, but because this could be a prelude to the conflict that rests on the horizon between Naruto standing in for Hashirama and Sasuke standing in for Madara. As Hashirama remarks to himself numerous times in this volume, always conflict no matter what the era. The flashback in question that takes place is by far the most detailed and longest in the series. Taking up more than 60% of volume 65, it is a fascinating read, comprehensively telling the story of both Madara and Hashirama's origins, where their respective points of view stem from and what led them to defect from one another. And it's that slow progression to embracing the darkness that this story does a phenomenal job of conveying and making sense of. Beginning as naive and optimistic children with plans for a peaceful future, eventually becomes a war of ideology. A war where a vision of a pessimistic reality stands in opposition to honest optimism for the future. One where the teachings and ultimately the hatred from both sides pass on down the poison that ultimately leads to the downfall of Madara and, on a long enough timeline, Konoha and the rest of the world. It's such a compelling story where 2 children turned brothers turned sworn enemies have to contend with the reality that they are faced with. That in life there are no clear-cut solutions, no matter how honest or well-intentioned you might think you're being. I think, alongside the flashback with Obito and Madara, this flashback is the best the series has demonstrated, and within which I found myself oddly attached to the character of Hashirama and even very sympathetic towards Madara. Someone I never thought I would feel any sympathy for, but in the end, that's exactly what this story has made me feel. That fighting for a world where children no longer have to deal with the looming nightmare of war is worth fighting for. It strips them of their lives, their innocence, and, in Madara's case, their light, leaving only darkness behind. Time and again, with each subsequent Hokage signaling their own unique shortcomings to one another, one inalienable thought comes to the mind of Hashirama yet again. And at the same time, Sasuke is left to decide the fate of his group and indeed his village. Ultimately, he decides to head towards the battlefield, for alongside each and every one of these famed shinobi of the past, each flawed in their own rights, Hashirama once again reaffirms something in his mind, that there may always be conflict no matter the era, but this time, it will be the end of wars. Kakashi is just fucking cool, okay? There, I said it. He's also got the best design. I just love seeing how Kishimoto draws the dude. But anyways, Kakashi and Obito end up fighting and arguing ironically in a different reality. They say that most great drama comes from people speaking in rooms. Without story, these scenarios have no meaning and therefore lack the qualities that compel people to listen once stripped of all the bells and whistles. But when you can put 2 well-established characters in a room together with conflicting ideologies, then there are few things more compelling than that. The conversation between Kakashi and Obito is just that, a compelling conflict of ideology, and it makes me feel all the more sympathetic for the lost Obito and so much more supportive of the resolute Kakashi. There's a portion of this conversation that succinctly breaks down the exact argument here for Kakashi. He says, and I quote, "The hole in one's heart gets filled by others around you, but people won't flock to someone who abandons the memory of his friends and gives up on the world. That won't help fill the hole in your heart, and people don't help those who run and do nothing. So long as you don't give up, there will be salvation." This is a superbly worded quote that strikes at the heart of this conversation, the main character of Naruto himself, and indeed most of the major conflicts throughout this entire series. And fittingly, as if symbolic of this resolve Kakashi is vouching for, Naruto's and the rest of the Shinobi Allied Forces' resolve is finally rewarded. This is the part of the video where I devolve into making nothing but childish sounds because all of this is just so damn cool. Like, just when you think things couldn't get even more awesome, they do. Within seconds of each other, mind you.
そして俺がおかげになる
Bullshit.
I swear, when Sasuke showed up and the first thing he said was that he was gonna become Hokage right next to Naruto, maybe because of the build-up or the tension I was feeling at the time, but I just burst out laughing. I was so excited to see Cell 7 reunited for the very first time in what feels like hundreds of chapters, fighting alongside each other for their village's well-being. So much of what transpires from this point on is wall-to-wall, or should I say page-to-page action. It's a feast for the eyes and even made me, someone that's only recently picked up Naruto, feel an incredible amount of nostalgia. And everything just comes together in the best of ways during this section. Shikamaru takes over from his dad in formulating a strategy. Heck, Sakura makes it known that she knows how to fight using the diamond on her forehead like Tsunade, which I wasn't expecting, but again, totally loved. There are so many interesting little dynamics at play exploding around the environment. It's here that Naruto as a story truly basks in the time it's taken throughout the series in building up its characters. Everything from something innocuous like Kiba looking for attention in becoming Hokage, to something dastardly like Madara's shifting demeanor when Hashirama shows up. This is the result, and man is it spectacular. We even get a recreation of one of the early illustrations by Kishimoto with Cell 7 standing front and center, showing the full scope of how far everyone has come in such a long time span. I just know there's going to be so much more conflict between these three, particularly Naruto and Sasuke, so much so that I'm just going to enjoy this brief interlude in the violence and fighting, because things are about to get really, really bad for everyone. Guys, this is where I'm going to have to leave off this week. Next week will be my final Naruto video covering this series. I can't believe I'm saying that, it's been so long. Make sure to like and subscribe for more long-running series like this. But until then, I've been Toy Not Mark, and thank you all so much for watching.